Yemen is one of the oldest centers of civilization in the Near East. Its relatively fertile land and adequate rainfall in a moister climate helped sustain a stable population, a feature recognized by the ancient Greek geographer Ptolemy, who described Yemen as Eudaimon Arabia, meaning fortunate Arabia or happy Arabia. Yemenis had developed the South Arabian alphabet by the 12th to 8th centuries BC, which explains why most historians date all of the ancient Yemeni kingdoms to that era. Between the 12th century BC and the 6th century AD, it was dominated by 6 successive civilizations which rivaled each other, or were allied with each other and controlled the lucrative spice trade. Ma'an, Qataban, Hadhramaut, Awsan, Saba and Himyar. Islam arrived in AD 630, and Yemen became part of the Muslim realm. Ancient history. With its long sea border between early civilizations, Yemen has long existed at a crossroads of cultures, with a strategic location in terms of trade on the west of the Arabian Peninsula. Large settlements for their era existed in the mountains of northern Yemen as early as 5000 BC. Little is known about ancient Yemen and how exactly it transitioned from nascent Bronze Age civilizations to more trade-focused caravan kingdoms. This may be due to social or official discouragement of research into pre-Islamic civilizations in Arabia. The Sabian kingdom came into existence from at least the 11th century BC. There were 4 major kingdoms or tribal confederations in South Arabia: Saba, Hadhramaut, Qataban and Ma'an. Saba is believed to be biblical Sheba and was the most prominent federation. The Sabian rulers adopted the title Muqarrib, generally thought to mean unifier or a priest-king. The role of the Muqarrib was to bring the various tribes under the kingdom and preside over them all. The Sabans built a great dam of Marib around 940 BC. The dam was built to withstand the seasonal flash floods surging down the valley. Between 700 and 680 BC, the kingdom of Awsan dominated Aden and its surroundings. Sabian Muqarrib Karibi I changed his ruling title to that of a king, and conquered the entire realm of Awsan, expanding Sabian rule and territory to include much of South Arabia. Lack of water in the Arabian Peninsula prevented the Sabians from unifying the entire peninsula. Instead, they established various colonies to control trade routes. Evidence of Sabian influence is found in northern Ethiopia, where the South Arabian alphabet, religion and pantheon, and the South Arabian style of art and architecture were introduced. The Sabian created a sense of identity through the religion. They worshipped El-Makar and believed themselves to be his children. For centuries, the Sabians controlled outbound trade across the Bab el-Mandeb, a strait separating the Arabian Peninsula from the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea from the Indian Ocean. By the 3rd century BC, Qataban, Hadhramaut and Ma'an became independent from Saba and established themselves in the Yemeni arena. Minian rule stretched as far as Dedan, with the capital at Barakish. The Sabians regained the control over Ma'an after the collapse of Qataban in 50 BC. By the time of the Roman expedition to Arabia Felix in 25 BC, the Sabians were once again the dominating power in southern Arabia. Aelius Gallus was ordered to lead a military campaign to establish Roman dominance over the Sabians. The Romans had a vague and contradictory geographical knowledge about Arabia Felix, Yemen. The Roman army of 10,000 men was annihilated before Marib. Strabo's close relationship with Aelius Gallus led him to attempt to justify his friend's defeat in his writings. It took the Romans 6 months to reach Marib and 60 days to return to Egypt. The Romans blamed the Nabatean guide and executed him for treachery. No direct mention in Sabian inscriptions of the Roman expedition has yet been found. After the Roman expedition, perhaps earlier, the country fell into chaos and two clans, namely Hamdan and Himyar, claimed kingship, assuming the title King of Sheba and Duraden. Duraden allied themselves with Axum in Ethiopia against the Sabians. The chief of Bakal and king of Saba and Duraden, El-Shara-Yardub, launched successful campaigns against the Himyarites and Habashat. El-Shara took pride of his campaigns and added the title Yardub to his name, which means suppressor. He used to kill his enemies by cutting them to pieces. Sana came into prominence during his reign as he built the Gamdan Palace to be his place of residence. The Himyarite annexed Sana from Hamdan circa AD 100. Hashdi tribesmen rebelled against them, however, and regained Sana in around 180. It was not until 275 that Shamayyaris conquered Hadhramaut and Najran and Tihama, thus unifying Yemen and consolidating Himyarite rule. The Himyarites rejected polytheism and adhered to a consensual form of monotheism called Rahmanism. In 354, Roman Emperor Constantius II sent an embassy headed by Theophilos the Indian to convert the Himyarites to Christianity. According to Philostorgius, the mission was resisted by local Jews. Several inscriptions have been found in Hebrew and Sabian praising the ruling house in Jewish terms for helping and empowering the people of Israel. According to Islamic traditions, King Asad the Perfect mounted a military expedition to support their Jews of Yathrib. Abu Arabia, as known from the inscriptions, led a military campaign to Central Arabia or Najd to support the vassal kingdom of Kinda against the Lakhmids. However, no direct reference to Judaism at Yathrib was discovered from his lengthy reign. Abu Kariba died in 445, having reigned for almost 50 years. By 515, Himyar became increasingly divided along religious lines, and a bitter conflict between different factions paved the way for an Axumite intervention. The last Himyarite king Marduk-Arib was supported by Axum against his Jewish rivals. Marduk-Arib was Christian and launched a campaign against the Lakhmids in southern Iraq, with the support of other Arab allies of Byzantium. The Lakhmids were a bulwark of Persia, which was intolerant to a proselytizing religion like Christianity. After the death of Marduk-Arib in around 521, a Himyarite Jewish warlord named Yusuf Asar Yada rose to power. His honorary title Yada means to avenge. Yemenite Christians, aided by Axum and Byzantium, systematically persecuted Jews and burned down several synagogues across the land. Yusuf avenged his people with great cruelty. He marched toward the port city of Mocha, killing 14,000 and capturing 11,000. Then he settled a camp in Bab el-Mandeb to prevent aid flowing from Axum. At the same time, Yusuf sent an army under the command of another Jewish warlord, Sharahil-Yakbal, to Najran. Sharahil had reinforcements from the Bedouins of the Kinda and Madaj tribes, eventually wiping out the Christian community in Najran. Yusuf ad-Nuwas, as known in Arabic literature, believed that Christians in Yemen were a fifth column. Christian sources portray ad-Nuwas as a Jewish zealot, while Islamic traditions say that he threw 20,000 Christians into pits filled with flaming oil. This history, however, is shrouded in legend. ad-Nuwas left two inscriptions, neither of them making any reference to fiery pits. Byzantium had to act to lose all credibility as protector of Eastern Christianity. It is reported that Byzantium Emperor Justin I sent a letter to the Axumite king Caleb, pressuring him to attack the abominable Hebrew, a tripartite military alliance of Byzantine, Axumite and Arab Christians successfully defeated Yusuf around 525 to 527, and a Christian client king was installed on the Himyarite throne. Esimophios was a local Christian lord, mentioned in an inscription celebrating the burning of an ancient Sabian palace in Marib to build a church on its ruins. 3 new churches were built in Najran alone. Many tribes did not recognize Esimophios' authority. Esimophios was displaced in 531 by a warrior named Abrahah, who refused to leave Yemen and declared himself an independent king of Himyar. Emperor Justinian I sent an embassy to Yemen. He wanted the officially Christian Himyarites to use their influence on the tribes in Inner Arabia to launch military operations against Persia. Justinian I bestowed the dignity of king upon the Arab sheikhs of Kinda and Ghassan in Central and North Arabia. From early on, Roman and Byzantine policy was to develop close links with the powers of the coast of the Red Sea. They were successful in converting Axum and influencing the culture. The results with regard to Yemen were rather disappointing. A Kendite prince called Yazid bin Kabshat rebelled against Abrahah and his Arab Christian allies. A truce was reached once the Great Dam of Marib had suffered a breach. Abrahah died around 555 to 565. No reliable sources regarding his death are available. The Sassanid Empire annexed Aden around 570. Under the rule, most of Yemen enjoyed great autonomy except for Aden and Sana'a. This era marked the collapse of ancient South Arabian civilization, since the greater part of the country was under several independent clans until the arrival of Islam in 630. Middle Ages, advent of Islam and the 3 dynasties. Muhammad sent his cousin Ali to Sana'a and its surroundings around 630 AD. At the time, Yemen was the most advanced region in Arabia. The Banu Hamdan Confederation were among the first to accept Islam. Muhammad sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal as well to Al-Janad in present-day Taiz, and dispatched letters to various tribal leaders. The reason behind this was the division among the tribes and the absence of a strong central authority in Yemen during the days of the Prophet. Major tribes, including Himyar, sent delegations to Medina during the year of delegations around 630 to 631. Several Yemenis had already accepted Islam, including Ammar ibn Yazir, al-Ala al-Hadrami, Miqdad ibn Aswad, Abu Musa Ash'ari and Shahabil ibn Hassana. A man named Abdallah ibn Ka'ab al-Ansi expelled the remaining Persians and claimed to be a prophet of Rahman. He was assassinated by a Yemeni of Persian origin called Feroz al-Daylami. Christians, who were mainly staying in Najran along with Jews, agreed to pay jizya, although some Jews converted to Islam, such as Wahb ibn Munabi and Ka'ab al-Ahbar. The country was stable during the Rashidun Caliphate. Yemeni tribes played a pivotal role in the Islamic conquests of Egypt, Iraq, Persia, the Levant, Anatolia, North Africa, Sicily and Andalusia. Yemeni tribes that settled in Syria contributed significantly to the solidification of Umayyad rule, especially during the reign of Marwan I. Powerful Yemenite tribes like Kinda were on his side during the Battle of Marjahit. Several emirates led by people of Yemeni descent were established in North Africa and Andalusia. Effective control over entire Yemen was not achieved by the Umayyad Caliphate. Imam Abdullah ibn Yahya al-Kindi was elected in 745 to lead the Abadi movement in Hadhramaut and Oman. He expelled the Umayyad governor from Sana'a and captured Mecca and Medina in 746. Al-Kindi, known by his nickname Talib al-Haq, established the first Abadi state in the history of Islam but was killed in Taif around 749. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Ziyad founded the Ziyadid dynasty in Tihamah around 818. The state stretched from Haley to Aden. They nominally recognized the Abbasid Caliphate but were in fact ruling independently from the capital in Zabid. The history of this dynasty is obscure. They never exercised control over the highlands and Hadhramaut, and did not control more than a coastal strip of the Yemen bordering the Red Sea. A Himyarite clan called the Tahirids established the rule over the highlands from Sada to Taiz, while Hadhramaut was an Abadi stronghold and rejected all allegiance to the Abbasids in Baghdad. By virtue of its location, the Ziyadid dynasty of Zabid developed a special relationship with Abyssinia. The chief of the Darlak Islands exported slaves as well as amber and leopard hides to the then ruler of Yemen. The first Zaydi Imam Jafar ibn al-Hussein arrived to Yemen in 893. He was the founder of the Zaydi Imamate in 897. He was a religious cleric and judge who was invited to come to Saudi from Medina to arbitrate tribal disputes. Imam Jafar persuaded local tribesmen to follow his teachings. The sect slowly spread across the highlands, as the tribes of Hashid and Bakal, later known as the twin wings of the Imamate, accepted his authority. Jafar established his influence in Sada and Najran. He also tried to capture Sana'a from the Tahirids in 901, but he failed miserably. In 904, the Karmatians invaded Sana'a. The Tahirid emir Asad ibn Ibrahim retreated to Al-Jawf, and between 904 and 913, Sana'a was conquered no less than 20 times by Karmatians and Tahirids. Asad ibn Ibrahim regained Sana'a in 915. The country was in turmoil as Sana'a became a battlefield for the three dynasties as well as independent tribes. The Tahirid emir Abdullah ibn Qatan attacked and burned Zabid in 989, severely weakening the Ziyadid dynasty. The Ziyadid monarchs lost effective power after 989, or even earlier than that. Meanwhile, a succession of slaves held power in Zabid and continued to govern in the name of the masters, eventually establishing their own dynasty around 1022 or 1050 according to different sources. Although they were recognized by the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, they ruled no more than Zabid and 4 districts to its north. The rise of the Ismaili Shia Sulayhid dynasty in the Yemeni highlands reduced the history to a series of intrigues. Sulayhid dynasty. The Sulayhid dynasty was founded in the northern highlands around 1040. At the time, Yemen was ruled by different local dynasties. In 1060, Ali ibn Muhammad al-Sulayhi conquered Zabid and killed its ruler al-Najjar, founder of the Najahid dynasty, whose sons were forced to flee to Darlak. Hadhramaut fell into Sulayhid hands after the capture of Aden in 1162. By 1063, Ali had subjugated Greater Yemen. He then marched toward Hejaz and occupied Makkah. Ali was married to Asma bint Shihab, who governed Yemen with her husband. The khutbah during Friday prayers was proclaimed in her husband's and her name. No other Arab woman had this honor since the advent of Islam. Ali al-Sulayhi was killed by Najjar's sons on his way to Mecca in 1084. His son Ahmad al-Makran led an army to Zabid and killed 8,000 of its inhabitants. He later installed the Zirides to govern Aden. Ahmad al-Makram, who had been afflicted with facial paralysis resulting from war injuries, retired in 1087 and handed over power to his wife Awa al-Sulayhi. Queen Awa moved the seat of the Sulayhid dynasty from Sana'a to Jibla, a small town in central Yemen near Ayyubid. Jibla was strategically near the Sulayhid dynasty source of wealth. The agriculture agricultural Central Highlands. It was also within easy reach of the southern portion of the country, especially Aden. She sent Ismaili missionaries to India, where a significant Ismaili community was formed that exists to this day. Queen Arwa continued to rule securely until her death in 1138. Arwa al-Sulayhi is still remembered as a great and much-loved sovereign, as attested in Yemeni historiography, literature, and popular lore, where she is referred to as Balkis al-Sufra, that is, the junior queen of Sheba. Although the Sulayhids were Ismaili, they never tried to impose the beliefs on the public. Shortly after Queen Arwa's death, the country was split between 5 competing petty dynasties along religious lines. The Ayyubid dynasty overthrew the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt. A few years after the rise to power, Saladin dispatched his brother Turan Shah to conquer Yemen in 1174. Zurayid dynasty Al-Abbas and Amp al-Masud, sons of Karam al-Yami from the Hamdan tribe, started ruling Aden for the Sulayhids. When al-Abbas died in 1083, his sons Ure, who gave the dynasty its name, proceeded to rule together with his uncle al-Masud. They took part in the Sulayhid leader al-Mufaddal's campaign against the Najahid capital Zabad and were both killed during the siege. The respective sons ceased to pay tribute to the Sulayhid queen Arwa al-Sulayhi. They were worsted by a Sulayhid expedition, but Queen Arwa agreed to reduce the tribute by half, to 50,000 dinars per year. The Zurayids again failed to pay and were once again forced to yield to the might of the Sulayhids. But this time the annual tribute from the incomes of Aden was reduced to 25,000. Later on they ceased to pay even that, since Sulayhid power was on the wane. After 1110, the Zurayids thus led a more than 60 years long independent rule in the city, bolstered by the international trade. The chronicles mention luxury goods such as textiles, perfume and porcelain, coming from places like North Africa, Egypt, Iraq, Oman, Yemen and China. After the demise of Queen Arwa al-Sulayhi in 1138, the Fatimids in Cairo kept a representation in Aden, adding further prestige to the Zurayids. The Zurayids were sacked by the Ayyubids in 1174 AD. Ayyubid conquest. Turan Shah conquered Zabad from the Mahdids in May 1174, then marched toward Aden in June and captured it from the Zurayids. The Hamdanid sultans of Sana resisted the Ayyubid in 1175, and it was not until 1189 that the Ayyubids managed to definitely secure Sana. The Ayyubid rule was stable in southern and central Yemen, where they succeeded in eliminating the mini-states of that region, while Ismaili and Zaydi tribesmen continued to hold out in a number of fortresses. The Ayyubids failed to capture the Zaydis' stronghold in northern Yemen. In 1191, Zaydis of Qataban rebelled and killed 700 Ayyubid soldiers. Imam Abdullah bin Hamza proclaimed the imamate in 1197 and fought al-Mu'izz, the Ayyubid Sultan of Yemen. Imam Abdullah was defeated at first but was able to conquer Sana and Amar in 1198. Al-Mu'izz was assassinated in 1202. Abdullah bin Hamza carried on the struggle against the Ayyubid until his death in 1217. After his demise, the Zaydi community was split between two rival imams. The Zaydis were dispersed and a truce was signed with the Ayyubid in 1219. The Ayyubid army was defeated in Damar in 1226. Ayyubid Sultan Masud Yusuf left for Mecca in 1228, never to return. Other sources suggest that he was forced to leave for Egypt instead in 1123. Rasulid dynasty. The Rasulid dynasty was established in 1229 by Umar ibn Rasul. Umar ibn Rasul was appointed deputy governor by the Ayyubids in 1223. When the last Ayyubid ruler left Yemen in 1229, Umar stayed in the country as caretaker. He subsequently declared himself an independent king by assuming the title al-Malik al-Mansur. Umar established the Rasulid dynasty on a firm foundation and expanded its territory to include the area from Dhofar to Mecca. Umar first established himself at Zabid, then moved into the mountainous interior, taking the important highland Santasana. However, the Rasulid capitals were Zabid and Tahirids. He was assassinated by his nephew in 1249. Omar's son Yusuf defeated the faction led by his father assassins and crushed several counter-attacks by the Zaydi Imams who still held on in the northern highland. It was mainly because of the victories which he scored over his rivals that he assumed the honorific title al-Muzaffar. After the fall of Baghdad to the Mongols in 1258, al-Muzaffar Yusufi appropriated the title of Caliph. He chose the city of Ta'iz to become the political capital of the kingdom because of its strategic location and proximity to Aden. Al-Muzaffar Yusufi died in 1296, having reigned for 47 years. When the news of his death reached the Zaydi Imam al-Mutawakkil al-Muta'ab bin Yahya, he commented by saying, "The greatest king of Yemen, the Muawiyah of the time, has died. His pens used to break our lances and swords to pieces. The Rasulid state nurtured Yemen's commercial links with India and the Far East. They profited greatly by the Red Sea transit trade via Aden and Zabid. The economy also boomed due to the agricultural development programs instituted by the kings who promoted massive cultivation of palms. It was during this period that coffee became a lucrative cash crop in Yemen. The Rasulid kings enjoyed the support of the population of Tihama and southern Yemen, while they had to buy the loyalty of Yemen's restive northern highland tribes. The Rasulid sultans built numerous madrasas in order to solidify the Shafi'i school of thought, which is still the dominant school of jurisprudence amongst Yemenis today. Under the rule, Ta'iz and Zabid became major international centers of Islamic learning. The kings themselves were learned men in their own right, who not only had important libraries but who also wrote treatises on a wide array of subjects, ranging from astrology and medicine to agriculture and genealogy. The dynasty is regarded as the greatest native Yemeni state since the fall of pre-Islamic Himyarite kingdom. They were, of course, of Turkish descent but claimed an ancient Yemenite origin to justify the rule. The Rasulids were not the first dynasty to create a fictitious genealogy for political purposes, nor were they doing anything out of the ordinary in the tribal context of Arabia. By claiming descent from a solid Yemenite tribe, the Rasulid brought Yemen to a vital sense of unity in an otherwise chaotic regional milieu. They had a difficult relationship with the Mamluks of Egypt because the latter considered them a vassal state. The competition centered over the Hejaz and the right to provide kiswa of the Kaaba in Mecca. The dynasty became increasingly threatened by disgruntled family members over the problem of succession, combined by periodic tribal revolts, as they were locked in a war of attrition with the Zaydi Imams in the northern highlands. During the last 12 years of Rasulid rule, the country was torn between several contenders for the kingdom. The weakening of the Rasulids provided an opportunity for the Banu Tayyar clan to take over and establish themselves as the new rulers of Yemen in 1454. Tahirid dynasty. The Tahirids were a local clan based in Rada. While they were not as impressive as the predecessors, they were still keen builders. They built schools, mosques and irrigation channels, as well as water cisterns and bridges in Zabid and Aden, Rada and Juban. The best-known monument is the Amariya Madrasa in Rada, which was built in 1504. The Tahirids were too weak either to contain the Zaydian arms or to defend themselves against foreign attacks. The Mamluks of Egypt tried to attach Yemen to Egypt, and the Portuguese, led by Afonso de Albuquerque, occupied Socotra and made an unsuccessful attack on Aden in 1513. The Portuguese posed an immediate threat to the Indian Ocean trade. The Mamluks of Egypt therefore sent an army under the command of Hussein al-Kurdi to fight the intruders. The Mamluk Sultan of Egypt sailed to Zabad in 1515 and began diplomatic talks with Tahirid Sultan Emir bin Abdul Wahab for money that would be needed for jihad against the Portuguese. Instead of confronting the Portuguese, the Mamluks, who were running out of food and water, landed the fleet on the Yemen coastline and started to harass Dihama villages for what they needed. Realizing how rich the Tahirid realm was, they decided to conquer it. The Mamluk army, with the support of forces loyal to Zaidi Imam al-Mutawakkil Yahya Sharaf ad-Din, conquered the entire realm of the Tahirid but failed to capture Aden in 1517. The Mamluk victory turned out to be short-lived. The Ottoman Empire conquered Egypt, hanging the last Mamluk Sultan in Cairo. It was not until 1538 that the Ottomans decided to conquer Yemen. The Zaydi highland tribes emerged as national heroes by offering a stiff, vigorous resistance to the Turkish occupation.